Welcome to today's fitting with Graham, who by the looks of the iron you're using has been playing quite a long time. Yes. A beautiful old Mizuno blade. Oh, so pretty. Yeah. We were having a brief chat a moment ago about your kind of getting through kind of COVID, getting back into your golf and looking at it a different way. So what's that sparked off?
So it's just, I mean, growing up playing and being lucky to play a lot. So in terms of when you play now and with family, you're sort of playing 5-6 times a year top sometimes, and just as I say, COVID gave us a bit more time, and I read the Mark Brody book and just got data. I mean, I do like a bit of a data geek as it is, but getting back into it and thinking there's a lot of stuff that I should be learning rather than what I think I should be doing. And losing shots because of it.
And you alluded to the tours and what the tour players are now playing, be it kind of PGA/DP World Tour, Champions Tour, Ladies Tour. There's been a real shift in what those players are using. Yeah. And you say relevance for recreational.
As in what can we learn from? I mean, these are ridiculous golfers, I know. However, there are certain things like we're saying. We've done a bit of analysis, looking at what the PGA guys are using, the Champions Tour, the ladies, and definitely seems to be the women are hybrids, definitely going for it. The Champions Tour using a lot of hybrids, driving irons. The guys tend not to be nothing over a 4-iron. Yeah. Now the Lofts have obviously changed a lot. I'm sure you'll see from what I'm using and understanding that as well. Yeah. The Loft changes over the years. So like when I start with the T9 and feel embarrassed hitting a 7, I'm actually hitting an 8.
They change. It's something that's morphed to that.
It's embarrassing, unfortunately.
Find ways of making us hit it further, but ultimately, as I say, it's what works best, and we'll see what we can dig into this afternoon for you.
Hopefully, there are some shots there, and
I'm sure. Great. Let's get cracking.
Fantastic.
I'm going to drop a decent bit of weight first. I'll grab a relevant head without any teching.
Okay,
no
worries.
So, head-wise, I don't want to go to anything too mad. I just want something I can control the balance with and not add a lot of tech. So I'm going to start with that one. Simply, it's just a one-piece milled head, but I can control the weight with the weight in the back. And then let's just take...
So are we trying to find the extremes a little bit?
I wouldn't say extremes.
But just enough to show us where the...
Yeah, I need to go different enough to kind of show a marked change from what you're currently using. Almost to kind of, we know where, we can't go any heavier than those. So I know where the top out is. I need to now find the bottom out to know where the window of weight we're working in, and then find the middle ground.
This will feel a bit weird, will it?
Hopefully, yeah. Okay. So head-wise, got something without tech. I don't want to get the heads kicking loads of ball speed on it.
Right. Okay.
But marginally more forgiving. Still what I call a muscle cavity. But
the shaft is much.
Taking about 15 grams out the shaft.
Okay. Here goes. Still going left, so it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, by finding the bottom end of it, it essentially gets you physically, humans, we take the path of least resistance. So whatever movement pattern you have, you'll have certain tendencies in terms of how you move and how much you roll the face open and closed. Yeah. But if we're going kind of 5 gram increments, it just takes too long to get there. We might as well find too light quickly and then rein it back up. So.
So the numbers we'll get will tell us where it looks like it's going too far, or
the numbers won't. They'll just give us some validation on things. I'll be able to see whether it's getting out there. And I think that's a really important point, because that TrackMan doesn't give you answers. It gives you data.
Yes.
So you've got to know why you're getting that data to get to an answer.
So I mean, it's one of the things I was as in, it's, as I say, I love my data, but there's no doubt in terms of it's overwhelming looking at all the stuff there without that translator from that point of view.
Yeah, it'll validate what's producing the most efficient numbers. So from a launch and spin point of view, that's something you can look at and go, well, that kind of looks better. But actually, without that data, you can't say, right, that's spot on from a flight and a control and a efficiency point of view. You need it to get that info. But in terms of as to whether something's timing and swinging better and controlling better, that's actually me looking at you going, right, how in sync is it? How clean is it moving through? We'll see a consistency of data out of it. But it's then there are bits of, right, what are you doing in your swing? Are you playing more? Do we need to build in for progression? Someone getting older and playing less, and do we need to build in for progression the other way? All those sort of bits. So, and the feel aspect. The feel aspect's important as well.
Yeah.
It's unmeasurable, but it feeds into the confidence side of it. I'll see one more. So what I do like is I can see how the shaft's going out in front of you more, rather than the heavier it is. As you fire, the more the club gets behind it, the more you've got to play catch up with it. That one I can see the handle getting out in front of you more. That then allows you to control the face through the ball. So like fine-tuned shot shapes, rather than fight and rip the toe through, or kind of hold the handle off to hold the face off.
Yeah.
If we can get it so it's just a little bit of a change in impact rather than a big shift in the whole club, that means you can hit smaller shot shapes and control it and mitigate certain things on course a little bit more easily.
I'm ashamed to say I don't think I even asked when I got those clubs made what shaft was going in.
Wasn't even what we thought back then.
Question.
Yeah, it's just what
I
head
just
is
got
it?
what I was given, and then.
Okay, so what we can see straight away from this, now, okay, it's half a degree stronger loft.
Yeah.
But from a flight point of view, there was one that popped up a little bit there, but those ones are sort of 16.5, 18. So actually the first one's a bit steeper angle of attack, hence lower launch. Okay. That one's then shallowed back off more in line with these. So there's, half a degree is not going to affect launch angle much, but we can see spins down by 500 revs or so. Without it going left. So very, very soft draw. That shot's only got 4 yards of shot shape on it, so you're perfectly controllable. But we've now got 2 out of those 3 are right up the top end. So there's still a bit more to come out of it, but we've got the flight in a more efficient place, which is good. So that's straight out. Right, let me take the shaft a little further.
How many models and stuff like that do you carry in here?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. And we've got there's a shaft. I use that one. So, head models. Christ, I wouldn't. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure. I know we've got about 400 shafts on the wall.
Wow.
Just about 400, 450, something like that. There are thousands and thousands of combinations. But a couple of grams here or there, a change in balance point, really in terms of how allowing you to deliver the head as cleanly and with as fewer compensations as possible. That's really what fitting is. It's allowing you to move as naturally and freely as you can, and have as fewer adjustments to make at impact. That's the bit that really tightens up.
Very much.
So taking the shaft weight down a few more grams.
It's lighter again. None of these just give me 20 yards just straight off.
No, sadly. Well, it could do, but the ball wouldn't stop.
Get the top fly.
Well, shaft would. I give you a head that would, but yeah.
So that's sort of that little draw. That is my.
It's path more than anything else. So that face to target's 0.4 of a degree, so basically dead square. But your path's 2 and a bit degrees in to out. So it's the path from the inside, which is creating the shot shape. So you could argue is it the club face or the path, but in this instance, you're delivering the face basically dead square to target. So it's more created by the path being in to out.
Gotcha.
Which is the better way to be, if you're, because then you're not having to manipulate the club face to get it back online. just what you do with your swing line means a quieter club face through the ball, so more repeatability.
That's good news, because I don't think there's anything I can,
Yeah.
I can do about it. That felt good.
Okay, I'll watch one more of that. Okay.
I was aiming at that pin, honest.
Swing line's still good. Okay. Quite like where we are from a dead weight point of view, certainly not far off. I'm going to go to something where there's a bit more balance in the bottom end. That second one just got away from you. It kind of looked like it flipped a little bit, so I'm just going to set the weight slightly more towards the tip of the shaft to see if that can essentially create a little bit more of a drop, which can delay the hit a little bit rather than you have to kind of manage it.
Okay.
So using total weight to tie into your strength of rotation, strength of pull from the top, so that body and club come through in one go. But where the weight is then how you use your hands, how you get the, how you to release, how you deliver the club from the hands point of view. The more active your hands are, the more generally you need a bit of weight in the bottom end of the club to mean that you don't overpower the head and flip too early. You're kind of timing, creating that kind of lag and late hit to suit the delivery pattern with balance point.
Right. Okay.
How are you finding the experience so far?
It's good. As I sort of talked about to Simon before, it's like it's a lot of info from that, and it's just basically, I think part of the reason coming of just trusting in someone who knows. I'm learning a little bit about the sort of the launch monitors and stuff like that, but beyond the sort of the high level numbers, I really don't know what's going on from that point of view, and it's just trusting in the process from that, and even just learning that little bit where I say I've tried another couple of places of the shaft first, as in it makes sense that it's explained from that point of view, but as in I didn't know enough going to the retailer to think of why it did not make sense just to give me a club head to then do a shaft from that perspective. And it's a bit of a privilege if I'm not, in terms of getting to play with lots of toys and,
absolutely.
and having someone tell you hit this and it goes a bit further, and it's great.
I mean, part of it, you want it. We will want it to be fun. The process hopefully should be fun because we're finding out, having to be able to dial in on what's working and why, and start to see better and better and tighter results. So,
but it was, I mean, that point you made earlier about being fat. Like for me, I want to keep a lot of. I mean, like we all grew up loving Sevi from that point of view, and there's a bit of, yes, I want to get data and whatever to make it easier, but there's definitely some of the set that I want. To still have a bit of a laugh and try and hit silly shots.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is within like 1 or 2 grams of the last shaft, but there's more mass in the tip end of the shaft, and immediately ball speed's kicked up. But you could see as you started down, the club handle came with you, but the club had dropped in a little bit more. And that straight away, you could almost see, it's funny, kind of your hands go, right, there's something there, and delivered a stronger hit. So we're up at 119 ball speed there, 170 carry, but from a flow and a sequencing, that started to look like, right, now we're starting to really get close.
And that's just my, as in, I don't know I'm doing any of that. It's just your normal swing. Yeah,
you can see there's a certain
the
way, there's a sequence I'd want to see, and that initial move from the top, getting the club going, dropping in, and for you we need a little bit of a drop because you do have that bit of a rotation. It does sort of, because you're coming from the inside, it does close in a little bit. So if we don't have that drop, there's nothing to shut. So it ends up kind of gone, and there's nothing there to respond to. So you're kind of similar to me. I need to have a little bit of a drop in order to then shut the gate on it, but not have it go that way. So I might make the head slightly heavier, but that initial drop in was just a better flow, and therefore we built more speed and a better contact straight away.
Okay. So what weight is this different to what?
So your current shaft's 132 grams, this one's 112.
Okay.
Yeah, those two are much more repeating in terms of, and it will show in a moment, just thinking about it, in terms of how you're getting the club down through the ball and delivering it. So those two are literally, the pattern's right on top of one another. Yes, we can still square that off a little bit more, but I'm going to just go onto this screen here. There, I'll go carry. Right on top of one another and the longest of the two. Now, it's not all about yardage, but really we're in a slightly stronger flight position now. The efficiency is getting closer to where we want it to be. There's still a little bit more to come out of that, a little bit.
But that could just be practice, is it, in terms of our...
Possibly, we'll see. We'll see, yeah. There's sometimes with certain heads we might squeeze a bit, I say without, I don't want to artificially do it.
Yeah.
But if you were 1 degree up or kind of pretty much picking it, that can often reduce the efficiency a little bit, but you are down on it. Yes, you do deliver a little bit of loft. So that's, and by that I mean there's a little bit of extra for that angle of attack and loft. There's a little bit of extra loft delivered. For 3 down, I'd probably expect to see it more like, especially with a closing face, more like 17, 16 and a half, 17 on launch. So there's a little bit of extra loft delivered. So in theory, yeah, there's a little bit more flight strength to come out of, in theory, from an action point of view. However, it's those two, just from a timing point of view, look straight away more consistent and a little bit more efficient. So I will come back to that.
So the difference in this one's now
a couple of grams either way, fine tune. So that last one's in a very, very good place.
Yeah.
But there are variables around it that we need to do our due diligence and make sure that it really is the right one.
Okay. Shot.
Which one more of that?
Still need to remember to concentrate. The club's not going to do it for me.
Good line. I'll watch one more. That's a little higher.
So you're talking about the difference of the mat and outside. What difference will that
So
make?
off a mat you'll get a hair more launch and a hair less spin, and just because of where on the face it strikes.
Okay.
On turf it's a little, I asked one of the R&D companies to give me an answer as to what the conversion actually is, because I'm not aware of anyone who's done a specific test on it. Okay. But it's because of where the contact point is and the way that the head and the ball interact with the mat versus turf. Turf will come out a hair lower but spin a little bit more.
Okay.
But actually in terms of yardage wise, the two basically normalise. Okay, that's not quite, ball speed's nowhere near as good, so we'll get rid of that.
I didn't hit 1 and 2 weren't great shots.
It's straight, but timing wise,
yeah, no, I didn't hit either very well.
So, okay, let's push that. So I'm just checking it a little bit either side.
So I could blame the club for the last one, could I, maybe?
Yeah, when you get a consistency like that, then absolutely you can. Because we've seen how good from a consistency point of view that shaft was. And once we change some of those parameters a little bit, then if you get 3 shots where not one was within 6 yards of that one, then categorically that's club. Because he didn't do anything weird with the swing. 4 degrees angle of attack's good, path 0.4 into out, 3 into out 0.4. It's actually still very neutral delivery,
okay.
But just the efficiency of contact and ball speed's tailed off.
That's the first official time I've ever been allowed to blame the club.
So back a bit of ball speed there. Okay.
Is this somewhat similar to the pattern that we've been seeing recently? What we're sort of getting from that, so that would be the best one to work on. Keep them a pretty decent strike on that one, so lift the heel side, but not bad at all. Staying in the launch is very
So certainly we don't want to drop under that 112, 113 gram shaft weight, but that to me, I'm going to go back to that one we used earlier. That one to me looks like you've got to work it a little harder. That you almost got to just load up on it slightly more rather than just turn and collect it.
And even though I don't think it, I am realising all this as I'm
You'll
swinging.
subconsciously, you'll just find a way of getting the club through. So essentially what happens is, to get the club going, if it's too heavy, something's got to have an equal opposite forces. You've got to go that way for the club to go that way. So there's almost that load up and then catapult to it.
Okay.
So that's why these ones being 20 odd grams, 15, 20 grams heavier. Left is the miss because once it gets behind, you've got to go that way to get the club through, and then that face flips. Because it's also then the whole club's not coming with you to get shaft lead. So if you can get the handle ahead of the ball, then you can keep the face on line. If it gets behind you, then you've got to flip the head to play catch up, which is why you get the big old miss left with that. And the next one you go, you're not going left, and it goes over there.
Okay.
So it's where you've got to make quite a big kind of compensation with that to get it through the ball.
So swing one hasn't. I mean, I've never or hardly ever been able to hit a fade or a slice.
That's
Is
why.
that my swing or?
It's a little bit your swing because you swing from the inside. However, you're not 7 degrees from the inside. The fade comes from being able to work the handle that way and leave the face open to it. So if the club gets behind you, that's just not going to go that way and keep the face open. That's where it's going to, the only way to do that is to go there and then it goes off that way, because it's then rotating to catch the face up.
Okay.
So it's about getting, if we can keep the handle end, I'll go back to this one, if we can keep the handling coming with you, so as you turn, handle comes there, then you're able to keep turning and leave the face there. But you can also then pull the handle in a little bit more just to get it drifting a bit.
So I will have a better chance with.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely,
being able to.
definitely. Yeah, straight away from going back to this one, straight away from cleanliness of delivery and timing and your 0.6 path, 0.1 face to path. That now looks like everything's just unwinding through the shot. So it went a little higher, so it went a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
But actually, in terms of being able to just rotate and collect it, that then contact cleanliness. So like this shaft is like 3 grams heavier, but you could see. I could see having to work it harder to get the club through.
Okay.
That one looks like you can still be positive with it, but you can just collect the ball rather than have to fetch the club onto it.
And face the path is just strike where the angle of the face.
Relative to your swing line.
And the club is my
for
swing.
you, it's more dictated by your path.
Okay.
So if you can start to get the path less into out, then you can leave the face on line. If you're 3 degrees from into out, you've got to close it, and partly just the levers of the rotation rate to get it back onto target. But if we can get you under control of the path, then all of a sudden you can then go, all right, if you like that, if you turn through it with a square path, you haven't got to do anything with the club face to get it back online, it's already there.
Okay.
So there's a bit of habitual collection and rotation, because if you don't, with those it's missing it right. So those are patterns that will be in there that will soften, and gradually you'll get out of it. Over time you'll start to hit less shot shape because you haven't
Don't have
got
to work.
to. You've got to with those because the club's not there and so the face isn't staying on line, it's here, so it's rotating. So you have no option but to hit a bit of draw.
So
Going
I
lighter,
don't have to work quite as hard.
yeah. Going lighter changes the sequencing a bit, so that means everything's arriving when it should be.
Yeah.
And because you're very neutral and orthodox with your delivery, so's the ball flight.
Okay. A little bit heavy, but
Yeah. So got a little behind it, but
Yeah.
going back to this, it's far, far more stable from a face to path point of view.
okay.
Far more stable. So, okay, yes, there's a contact element there.
Yeah, I didn't hit that.
Bit of that is there's a slight move off. This also relates to that. If you don't get it going, again, that's where it's going to drop even more behind. But it's not got behind and then flipped. It's got a little behind it, but stayed square.
Right.
So, going back to it, having tried some other ones, we've gone from, yes, the first two are a little bit overdrawn, to then absolutely straight, or just a little bit heavy. But from a pattern point of view, I'd rather for you, that bit'll, the strike side, like on the last one, that's just every now and then.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that at all. Slightly shallower, that's just a
Better to be
pitch
short
side.
and straight than
But
short and
yeah,
left.
it's on. Yeah, it's absolutely down the line. And going back to, you can see how I can certainly see how in sync everything is through the ball. I do want to get just going to test to get ahead just to see if we can get a little bit more from this. I like where the flight is with it. In principle, I know there's a little bit more ball speed we can get out of it. So let's just see what we've got to do to get that, and whether that actually ties into something that you want to be using or not. Because it's not. We're still picking up. Certainly, well, probably half a club, but on average it's probably 7 or 8 yards. Your best one's up there within a few yards, but it's that drop-off element. So I'm just going to change ahead on this just to get a little bit more, see if we can get a little bit more energy off the club face to get that 140 efficiency. So Mizuno 243, a little bit of tech in the face, but very traditional head all through. So this one keeps the head very traditional, but we're just putting in a little bit of face tech just to see, does that just help get the extra bit of potential? Well, it's more just getting the full potential out of it. It's not like we're saying, it's not that you're all over the face, but in principle there's a little bit more ball speed we can achieve. But I don't want a knuckle spin off. I mean, you could argue, okay, is that when you start looking at different balls, and there is that side to it as well. But
so I mean, when you've got the fullback as an order-wise, irons, would you go then up and then down, or
I think
and then
irons
ball
you can
last
go,
sort of thing, or?
I think it's one of those where, I mean, it's not extreme on launch and spin, so we're not having to go really low spin or the highest spin ball there to try and find a window to get some control. So it then becomes a little bit of a, right, what's the best balance of everything? I mean, generally speaking, if we were looking at the whole bag, I normally do wedges last because it's the least effort. But if we're doing today, we'll do irons then down to the bottom end and look at the gapping and the distances. But you'd then from the irons, so like we can see, there's still plenty of ball flight there. There's still plenty of ball striking ability. Certainly be going for shorter 4-iron, we'd then go top and then graduate it back and say, right, if the drivers, so we're at kind of 170 over the 6-iron, the drivers at, just pull it up and say, right, 260, 270, pitching at 245. You then want a fair next club down to be ending around the 240, 250 mark, pitching 230 odd, and kind of balancing the shots back from there.
So what's the? What
So 243, Mizuno the MP243.
Okay.
So it's got a little bit of, it's still a very traditional kind of MP player's head.
Yeah.
Visually still very blade-like, but they've got a little bit of face tech in it. So it's a slightly thinner face. In principle, should be a little bit more ball speed, but it's what does it do to the spin number?
But with that shaft that you were.
That is staying in the modus to 105.
What a great stroke.
Okay, so interesting enough, it's the same sort of yardage, but it's higher. It's a little higher launch. It is a bit less spin. But it's not really for where I want what I want it to. It's not really doing what I want it to. So by going thinner face, it's set the weight a bit lower, which has just popped it up a bit more. Okay. So I'm going to drag the weight back up the head a little bit, because that's just sent it upwards a little bit more. Which is why the first one actually, it sounded high on the face. So
this didn't feel.
It's not particularly off centre, but by putting the weight lower, it's actually left a bit of a void behind, where you tend to strike it. So, so this is where actually taking the weight down the head and moving it around there for your mid to short irons in particular doesn't really help. So this is why I still play a blade in my shorter irons. It's okay, I don't want the one that jumps loads, but equally speaking, I don't find I strike it quite as solid because I'm getting it higher up the face. Okay. So I'm going to get a slight change on that head. That's actually why that first head, because the mass sits here, sits a little higher up. That's why that was such a solid sound and would have been a pretty solid feel as well. So there's a one of the glue bond on the sleeve came loose on the Strixon head that I want to test, which is just being re-glued now. So whilst waiting for that, I want to keep the weight on the face as much as possible. And now there aren't that many heads that keep the mass there. So the Strixon's got a bit of weight here, but it's also got a bit of a muscle bar like this one in the centre. Where they're looking at making heads more forgiving, they're putting weight down the bottom and into the heel and the toe. But for you, my fear is that's just going to pop them up. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to this. I'm just going to nudge the loft down a little bit to see if that helps to get the flight where we really want it to, ideally. Because
so that possibly one of the reasons that ping set I used to have would have. Just where the weight was.
So engineering-wise, they were always trying to get weight down the bottom to make it more forgiving, which is fine if you don't add loft a little bit, or if you don't create launch already. But where you create a little bit of launch, that's then kind of cuts the legs out from under it, makes it feel a little bit hollow because there's not the mass up the face on the back of the ball to keep the flight that way. It's almost like a kind of, if you take all the weight out the top, it's like a dead strike at the top of the face. And
that's where, when you go to and see these guys, that's where all that.
So a little bit they create a bit of shaft lean, and that's something that can be developed, but equally speaking, if your strike point's a little higher up the face naturally, then if there's no mass behind that point and it's all at the bottom of the head, it's like a kind of high on the, it's effectively it's a high on the face strike. So it's sort of a dead contact. So not going to feel as solid, but equally speaking, there's just not as much energy transfer because there's less mass behind the contact point. So I want to, this head's good from that point of view, but I just want to bring the loft down because it was just a little bit weak in terms of ball speed to see does that help just to give us that little extra efficiency. And then once the hozzel's reset on the other one, I'll bring the Strixon head in.
Well, the benefit of having your thing on site, isn't it? In terms
I mean, 100%. Obviously, from a build point of view, everything's built in there, so we can minimise any tolerances, but also exactly for that purpose, if something fails, like it's just a glue bond, and they're put on and screwed on and off so many times that can weaken the glue bond a bit. It means it can be fixed quickly.
Is it hard? It must be hard to keep up though with all the manufacturers. You get into a sort of steady.
Shafts are easier because they change the cycles less short. So there's generally a 5-year cycle, longer than that on steel shafts, and by hitting them, you start to learn what they feel like, but and then through players coming in and testing, a bit like the heads, you start to work out why a shaft or a head works for a certain player style. The annual changeover in heads, sometimes you kind of think you're just starting to get the best out of a head and then they change the model. It's ultimately it's just seeing it enough times with enough players with certain, again, strike tendencies, delivery patterns to see why a head starts to work for a particular player style. Thankfully at least we've always got a year with something. It's interesting. Straight away, going back to that head, it's more solid sound, and there's our 140 efficiency. So I moved the loft a hair. So we're at 29 on the loft rather than 30.5. But you've kept a certain reasonable amount of spin. launch angle's a little bit stronger, but that's then, by going back to a head with less tech, we've got better ball speed because the weight's in the right position.
So this is less.
So that's essentially a case, you could argue it's got a bit more forgiveness than a blade. That's like the old T-Zoid, where you've got that little bit of, essentially a little bit of a cavity around the outside and then a muscle bar in the middle to keep the centre of mass.
So this player, is that how they're called now?
Yeah, it'd still be, I'd call it a muscle cavity. There's a bit of perimeter weighting, but there's still that bit of muscle and weight behind the contact point. But that's why Mizuno did it with the T-Zoid, TaylorMade did a version of it. Darren Clark, I think, won the Open with the CB with, again, that muscle bar in the middle. It's been done several times over the years because the physics of it. Miura do one with it.
Because it works.
The physics makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just, as an engineering point of view, if you're not heel and toe oriented, but you do hit it higher up the face, maybe you drop, if you put an extra 10 grams in the sole of the club, you've got to take it out the top of it. So essentially, if there's not the mass there, the head just gives. So you're losing energy transfer.
Okay.
It's just those hands just getting involved. Yeah, really good strike, good on ball speed. That's an efficiency.
And that one strike did go off a little bit. Again, it's a lovely line through the ball. That's a little bit heely. So
Heel?
that's the one that strike went onto the heel side, yeah. Now, delivery, great, 4 down, 0.8 into out, and the face 0.7 closed to path, so 0.1 face to target. So lost a bit of ball speed because it just struck the heel.
So that's club path minus
Path is 0.8 into out, and then the face to path 0.7 closed to path, so face to target 0.1 of a degree.
So that face to target is a combination of those two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always feeling more passive with the hand, but just slow that rotation down. It's a massive back this one. Is there anything that's felt particularly better?
Again, I wonder whether that's just the heel strike again.
Wasn't the
Yes,
best.
just a heel strike again. So this is where you'd say, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve from the club? So ultimately, what we can say is, right, the regularity of the best hits is far more. 170, 169.5, 169.8, within a yard of one another.
Yeah.
And essentially half the shots are up that bit more. The last two are just strike point going into the heel.
Yeah.
Now, there's not a club out there that's going to save. It's not going to keep it within 2 yards. But equally speaking, what we do know is if we go away from that head style, a good swing's actually ironically punished a little bit.
Okay.
Because you haven't got the mass behind the strike point, so it ends up coming up a little bit weaker. And for me, I'd look at this and go, well, you come from playing heavy shaft and a blade, so actually by losing that centering of mass and losing that feedback on that kind of contact on that middled out strike, does it actually make you less likely to make those adjustments? I'm not sure I'd want to try to mitigate that last contact simply because
Sometimes I'm just going to have bad.
every now and then you're going to miss hit it a bit,
Yeah.
and you're still going to come up 8 to 10 yards short out of a heel strike. It's the slowest bit of the club head through the ball, therefore it has the most deformation on the head.
Yeah.
And also you'll find that the more you play with these, where everything's synced up, you're getting a little bit more extension. Then you'll get used to having to just migrate a hair further away to get that contact that you got the first one back with. It was actually middle.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where
We're not getting close.
look, this is a really good place.
Yeah.
There is that element where you questioned about the blades earlier on. So you're perfectly capable of playing blades, but actually, functionally, is there that much of a difference? The answer is no.
Okay.
And your miss it's not through the swing going off. We've tightened up, your tolerance on swing line's 0.3 of a degree, face 1 degree. That's tightening right up. You've got 190 revs on spin tolerance. That's nothing. The drop off is a heel strike.
And sometimes you're going
It doesn't matter what head it is, that's still going to drop back a little bit.
to. So what would have happened to the heel strike on the old ones?
principle may not be that different, but it might just drop back a hair more because of, from a timing point of view, like going back to that. I mean, actually quite a good time actually to go back to that now.
Okay.
Should feel significantly heavier.
Yes.
And you know, I guess if you get a little out of sync and then miss hit it, then the punishment's a little bit more. You know, with this shaft weight, because everything's still in sync and therefore you're more stable through your. It's not just like hands and arms saving it, where you've got 5% of your muscle mass. You're still turning through and grounded and better balanced. In principle, the energy loss is less because the sequencing between you and the club's a little bit more together. Versus a salvage with your hands and arms, there's just less on the back of the ball. There's less momentum into the back of the ball. You know, it's a bit like kind of doing that with a hand versus doing that with your shoulder. There's just less there's less going through the ball.
Okay.
So in theory, the drop off should be slightly more. In reality, it might not be much. I think it's more just how easy it is to get the best results, the repeatability of that.
And that lighter, I'm assuming as well, will be, as I get older, will be easier to maintain.
Yeah. Or rather, those will progressively get harder and harder and harder to get the best out of, whereas these will stay playable for a lot longer. Well, I guess you could argue it's the same answer, but
I know what you mean.
It's probably more that the incidence of good shots of that will just start to tail off and then they'll fall off a cliff, whereas this makes them maintainable for much longer.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so good one there is, now you can argue 2 or 3 yards of that is loft.
Yeah.
But whilst it's a really, really good neutral delivery line and it's a really nice contact, it's higher, much higher spin, less efficient. So that's 8 yards back from a representative strike with this. Now some of that height I think is where it's having just to kind of to get the club through. It works it underneath a bit more rather than staying there and keeping a slightly stronger delivery position because of the lighter shaft weight.
Okay.
And so this is the thing. So for you, it's very much a case of that's a really well put together swing, really good strike, and there's your 162 yard. And you're playing for your 160 yard 6-iron.
Yeah.
But actually, it should be there because that's got less club speed.
Wow.
So it's getting that impact, but angle of attack 3.5 down, versus that last one there 3 degrees down. There's not your delivery isn't different enough for there to be that much difference in shot pattern and end result, other than you're just having to just work that through, so it creates that little. If your release pattern tends to be a little bit that way to play catch up, it's essentially getting there and just popping it a little bit rather than being able to just turn onto it and stay exaggerately kind of there and cover it and send it that way, because there's nothing giving this more ball speed from a tech. There's no fast face. This is a single, apart from a screw, it's a single piece head exactly like that one is.
Right. Okay.
It's just that the setup of the club is allowing you to just get a slightly more efficient position through the ball and therefore keep the flight there rather than having it just want to powder puff up.
Okay.
I'll grab the blade to put on this just to to show how. I mean, so
I don't think I can hit that any much better.
Yeah, it's a beautiful contact. You can see from that. You couldn't find the crosshairs more than that, and you can hear it in the contact. It's a lovely swing. So, to go back to one of the questions you had earlier, absolutely. If you want to, I mean, the question mark comes up at the fore, and there's always an argument when you get to that top end. Do you play something that helps just to bridge that ball speed gap up?
At the 4 or above the 4?
or from 4 onwards. 5-iron, like we can see from this, there's no, I don't see there being a big gain to be had out of a 5-iron. Depending on, and this is where it goes into depending what you do above as well and bridge it back. The 4-irons where you could start to put something in that gives you a little bit more help. It's whereas loft drops, the relevance of that centre of gravity becomes less important because it's not, the more loft it is, the more it's going up the face. It's getting a higher strike point. As you're hitting down it more, the more effective strike point goes up the face a bit. As you shallow out and reduce loft, the CG is going to effectively find lower on the face.
Okay.
So, but we're not putting loads of tech in there. You could certainly, unless the faces are completely knackered on the short irons, which I don't think they are. No, which they're not. You could certainly change shafts in those and make them a darn sight easier to get the best out of.
Okay.
That's
And where would you
certainly an
consider
option.
that as in short iron? At the 8 or at the 9?
Well, when I put the blade on this, we see what the
See
6-iron does.
okay.
I think
That's up to me.
as a
is
sort
it?
of first step, you could quite feasibly say, look, there's quite a big change of shaft weight here. It's
Yeah.
it's not a small 5 gram. This is a 15, 17 gram change in shaft weight. It's quite a big
Something to get
big
used to.
change. And so is the best thing to do to change shafts in those first. We can always switch ahead on a longer iron down the line. But yeah, that was just the blade. But is that the first thing to do? Because that's automatically going to make the whole set of irons easier to get the best out of, and then you can see where the top end gets to. Then potentially then review the woods and how we bridge into those. That then potentially opens up the right. What do we do in that top end?
So would you be looking to like play with the irons for a bit before you got to the woods, or?
I think potentially. Yeah. So because we're not looking at a wholesale change of head style. So if you like the Mizuno heads, you're not going to find anything that's going to feel as soft as them.
Okay.
And out of a head with no tech in, we can see we can get you maximum efficiency. So it's not like they're completely knackered.
Okay.
So there's one of the immeasurable bit of fitting is, well, you've got to have something in the bag that you look forward to playing, and I still play a blade 5-iron down.
Okay.
So I know that I'm not losing that much. If I was losing that much performance, I wouldn't be playing them.
Yeah.
So, and you've got to want to use them. I like the process of ball striking, and I'd almost rather. Okay, maybe not this weekend on a competition that goes on a board. I want to score well, but I enjoy that feedback and that process of hitting the ball well and knowing I've struck it well. I'd rather hit it well than not score so well. I'd come off the course having felt I've played better golf than dogging it around and making a score. I don't find that satisfying at all.
No.
So there's an element of if that's kind of where you sit. Monty's always said, why make it harder than it needs to be? He played the Big Berthas that are on the wall around there, game improvement clubs. And yes, the pros aren't necessarily playing blades all the way through.
Yeah.
But they've got millions of dollars riding on it rather than what gives you enjoyment on a weekend morning in the sun now.
And what would have said that those were knackered, as in what would have shown they were?
How are the grooves wearing? How much of an edge do those grooves still have? And the answer to that is still quite a lot. So there's no rounding off on the grooves. What the grooves do there is they get moisture and dirt away from the ball face contact.
Okay.
So that's really the marker on those. Have they got massive stone chips in them? Are they so completely worn? Do they have like that nice sort of round ball mark in the face?
Nice.
But there's still plenty of face and groove to get performance out of with those.
Okay. And be able to look at something and tell.
Yeah, because you can the top edge of the groove rounds off, and then it doesn't cut through to the back of the ball.
Okay.
That's really the key marker there.
Okay.
And then even on a dewy fairway in the summer, you're still going to get flyers out of it. But these ones have still got plenty of they've got plenty of groove life in the face, as you can hear from that there. There's plenty of catch on the edge there. So
I mean, wedges will be the first to go rather than the
wedges,
rather
yeah.
than
So into these ones, then we'll see. I mean, they're not bad, but there's There's still a bit of edge there, but on the wedges now, between the grooves are little grooves now. So on partial swings, you will be losing spin with this versus a fresh wedge.
Okay.
Wet conditions, you'll be losing spin versus a fresh wedge. But on the irons, that's where actually we're not looking for the face to do quite the same thing. So as the club speed drops, the importance of the extra friction and the extra tread on the face becomes more and more and more important. Whereas on these ones, if you put the face of one of the the latest Vokeys or Callaway wedges or TaylorMade wedges on a 7-iron, that thing's spinning to hell and back because we don't need that much friction on it.
Okay.
So it'd be interesting to see with a pure blade
So this
on
is
this shaft. Obviously, I can't unglue this head and put it on. What we get.
So this is one of the 0311s, is it?
Yeah, just to keep it as similar to this last
Yeah.
one as possible, but going full blade rather than CB. Yeah, so that's that one where occasionally, and I do this as well, there's a little bit of a move off it that just sets you behind the ball, so it just gets into the ground just as you get to the ball. So again, very, very square from delivery, but just took a bit of ball speed off.
And this would be a different metal, would it, from the...
These two would be the same metal.
Same
Yeah.
metal.
Just,
compared to the, sorry, the Mizuno.
I mean, essentially it's still a carbon steel, but very, very, very. I mean, these are probably the closest in terms of feel to those Mizunos.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's blade to that. That's 137 efficiency, but the launch and the spin are very similar. The delivery line's the same. Distances within a couple of yards. Yeah, because the strike points
Is okay.
centered. Like that one again. It's saying margin low, but kind of centered margin low. If I go to one of these earlier ones with, make sure I pick the right head. Okay, it was marginally heel side, but if we're taking, that contact there, 137 efficiency, 18.52, 170. That one, so delivered a little bit less angle attack, so launched a touch higher, but within 20 revs on spin and 2 yards shorter. But that's just the more you cover and hit down a touch more, it brings the flight back down. So, no change in performance whatsoever, solid hit to solid hit. So, content-wise, a bit, just missed the contact. I would say it's slightly heel side, just dropped off a little bit there, but again, that's still right up there. So, I would say if we were looking at what's going to give you the most value in any change right now, it's shaft rather than head. And certainly as a kind of if you've got heads you like and they're in good nick, okay, a bladed 3-iron.
Yeah.
I might not do that. Yes, a little bit stronger on the lofts, certainly, just to get that launch and spin in the most ideal window. But it's the equivalent of what used to be called tour loft years back. 29 the 6-iron rather than 31. So it's something that was done regularly back then as well. But outside of that and dropping a bit of shaft weight, swing weights proportionally slightly heavier, slightly. As you drop shaft weight, if you didn't change head weight, the swing weight would drop a little bit because swing weight's a static balance. It doesn't actually take anything about how the club moves into account. It's just a scale of letters and numbers that we all thought was scientific until you go, actually, it's a static balance for trying to measure something of how it feels when it's moving. So these ones are just the kind of current standard length, so you could easily take the 1/4 inch off if you wanted to, which, to be honest, there's no benefit in the long runs of being longer. So my gut feel would be to maintain length where your current ones are. I don't see any necessity to change that. That's probably where we're seeing a couple of them going to the heel, just being a hair longer. But proportionate swing weight, we'd be at just on just over D2. So there's a bit more feel of the club head end in the overall weight of the club versus these with the heavier shaft weight. It's more evenly spread through. But essentially we're just taking a bit of weight out of this end and leaving you a little bit more feel for the club head and slightly tweaking the lofts. Because your delivery technique, very orthodox, very neutral, it's where I'd want to see it. We're just helping you get the club in a better position coming into impact to give you better control of ball flight, better control of club face, and not have to fight the clubs as much.
Okay. So as in, it feels like that shaft-wise is wrong. Head-wise would be, do I want a new toy or not?
There is that, yeah. And if we were starting from scratch, then actually these would be potentially one where you could develop a little bit more margin of error in a longer iron. Granted, no face tech, but that doesn't look to be particularly important. But these ones where the weight sits up the face there, even into the CB. I mean, you could make an argument to say, okay, there's nothing between them. Why would you bother with that and not go with this one? Because you're gaining a little bit of margin of error. But are we gaining enough over what you've currently got? Versus a head that you could find an argument, but I wouldn't. For example, I wouldn't sell you a set unless you particularly want, unless you said, right, I just want to change. I think we can make those work a down sight better by dropping the shaft weights. And probably, in terms of kind of working out what then works best into the top end. There's going to be much more change in the heads in the woods than there will be in the irons. With the materials and the tech that's in those, and off-centre performance. But my gut feel is do your current irons first, because you wouldn't still be using them if you didn't like them. And actually, we can tangibly change the consistency of your delivery with the shaft and a slight loft tweak and get you basically about a club longer over your average shot with just a shaft change. And then if there's something to gain at the top end, once we work kind of driver down, if we look at that side and we say, okay, well down the line, is there something, then we've not lost out. We can take a head off and switch a head on. It's not like it's sort of spending good money after bad. It's still going to be, the shaft's still going to be relevant, but if we want to head with a bit more performance, or down the line you say, actually, okay, I want to refresh the heads. Similarly.
So that's still
doable down the line.
So if we change the shaft on those, and then whatever came back, you could switch these on to the new shafts.
It's very rare that it's not doable, because it's rare to have sort of slightly funky bore depths, but 99% of the time that's not a problem whatsoever. So a bit of a roundup really, in that with your ball striking and the where your strike point is, going more forgiving, just put the centre of mass down the head, which meant it wasn't behind the bit of the face that you use. So yes, there's the odd miss into the heel. There isn't a head out that's going to save that. But when we went away from a one-piece sort of upper centre of gravity head, it's almost like we took the mass away from the bit that you used, and therefore it came out dead. We lost ball speed and it popped it up. So actually a blade head, an old school pretty Mizuno blade head, or like the PXG, the one we use in the test here, got you as much efficiency and a stronger trajectory than a forgiving, faster faced head. Now we didn't go extreme with them, but that wasn't going to affect the ball flight. We were only going to take spin off and lose that solidity of feel. But what did change, shaft weight. So we've gone from 132 grams. Now this says 105, but in the, I'll use a vertical X Flex, it's 112. So taken 20 odd grams out of the shaft, but left you some feel at the bottom end, and that's the bit that helped get that efficiency of delivery up a little bit of ball speed, but keep the control on the club face. So in your instance, this is much more about shaft and sequencing and timing. And by timing, I mean kind of where the handle gets to relative to the ball impact, not contact point. That's given you a bit of an extra pop performance.
So the change of head would just be a personal preference. If I felt like a new toy rather than the shaft's going to make the
and I think
the overall difference.
Part of it, you could certainly look at the top end of the irons and gain forgiveness, but I think the first thing to do is let's get these optimised. and then say, right, how do you feel about the 4 and the 5 iron now that we get a more suitable shaft in there, rather than going, like, now it's no surprise with that much shaft weight that they're just hard work.
Yeah.
So the performance is going to tail off, and then there's the odd unicorn shot that pops out there and goes
Should be, yeah.
representative distance. We should get that shot much more regularly. So a fractional tweak to loft, but the shaft weight's the real key.
Okay.
Real key. So you can still keep your trusty old blades.
Awesome. Delighted.
So,
Delighted.
yeah.
They look good though, don't they?
Can
Can you give them a little shine as well?
We can give a little clean up and a polish
Excellent.
up. Yeah, we'll do our best on that. But yeah, a blade is still a blade. Very little's changed over the years. You can't. There's no real tech update on a blade.
Okay.
As long as you're finding the right bit of the face, the performance is there. So,
Excellent. Thank you very much.
pleasure.